Missy Sims and Richard Wiles, president of the Center for Climate Integrity, are on a mission to hold big oil and gas corporations accountable for the damage they're doing to the planet. And they are joining me now. Thank you and welcome to the program. Missy Sims, let me go to you first because you have a case study that you are trying to get through the courts as we speak. And I believe it stems from the Hurricane Maria that so catastrophically hit Puerto Rico. Tell me about what you saw when you went to visit there and what kind of revelation you had.
Well, it was apocalyptic, and it's very interesting you use the word revelation. When I got off the plane, I couldn't believe it. It looked like an atomic bomb had been dropped on Puerto Rico. I had been there before the hurricane, and I had been there a few weeks after. You wouldn't have believed it. There was just mud and broken sidewalks and roads, and trees were leveled. All the foliage was gone and replaced with mud and rain and sand. And, 4,645 people died post-Maria. They had to bury their family members, and it was devastating.
Gosh, I see it makes you very, very emotional. And you spoke about how those graves had been disturbed and how family members and their remains were being disturbed by this terrible, as you say, apocalyptic event. The basis of your activity now, you and Missy, is to take these oil and gas companies to court and essentially using the RICO Act, which is, the racketeering precedents. How, David, is this going to work? How do you connect the two, oil and gas companies, racketeering, and the kind of terrible climate damage that we're seeing?
These cases are all sort of part of a movement of about 44 municipalities and states that have filed cases based on the fact that the industry knew that their products would cause climate change, and then they lied about it. In Missy's case, this racketeering case, that is significant because it indicates that the companies formed what is called a corrupt enterprise, and they basically worked together to push disinformation and lies about the fact that their products were causing climate change. They've been doing this for roughly 50 years. And they continue to do it today. They used to lie about the problem. As you know, the companies used to deny that climate change was even a fact. Now what they do is they lie about the solutions. But the important thing for a racketeering case is that they get together and they coordinate this through what's called a corrupt enterprise under the law. So Missy's case is the first racketeering case. There's been one more filed, and we expect to see more of these cases filed moving forward.
Missy, do you believe that even by prosecuting this case or taking on this case and using this legal standard, that in fact reparations or whatever you call it, damages will be paid? Can the courts afford to do this against these companies? Will they, do you think? Or are you looking for something not symbolic, but something that might have a precedent and an effect? What do you think is the result of your case?
Well, I'm not a policymaker. I'm a lawyer. And so I sue for damages. And we're prepared to go to trial. American courts have long held corporate malfeasance to task. And we intend to see it to that end. Whatever happens with that, that is not my concern. My concern is to seek damages on behalf of Puerto Rico.
What makes you think you can actually successfully get damages on this, in this case? Because if I'm not mistaken, it's the first, it's unprecedented.
We're the first climate change related case that has gone after a single event, and we have the science to back it up. So the science is that the rapid intensification of Maria was caused by carbon in the atmosphere. These defendants were 40.01% responsible for carbon in the atmosphere since 1965, and they colluded together to create this corrupt enterprise, to let the world think that that wasn't the case, that this was not going to happen, when in reality they had particularized individual information that said otherwise. So, and in fact, Shell in a 1998 memo called the TINA memo, there is no alternative, predicted that in the year 2010, that the eastern seaboard of the United States would be hit with a hurricane, or they called extreme weather events, that would initiate a class action. So we filed it 7 years after Shell predicted it.
Wow, so the company itself predicted such a thing might happen. Richard, as you see this case, and you've probably obviously seen the Montana case, it's different, but there's a lot of young people in the United States who are bringing certain cases saying that governments, through their policies and their allowing fossil fuel companies essentially unregulated behavior, are affecting their own constitutional right to a healthy atmosphere. In Europe, we have the elderly, the so-called grannies case that's being brought against, for the same reasons. How do you see the law potentially taking off where other attempts to mitigate climate have not been able to succeed?
Right, well, this is why the companies are so scared of these cases. Because in the United States, I don't think it's any secret that the oil companies have a stranglehold on the Congress as far as climate policy goes. They've been able to block action for the past at least 4 decades while they knew that their products were causing climate change. The courts are a different story. It's a much tougher forum for them. And the facts of these cases are very straightforward. They knew, they lied, and so they should pay for the damages. Very similar to the tobacco cases, opioid cases here in the United States. These are very straightforward cases. You make a product and you know it's going to cause damage, you know it's going to harm people, you know it's going to kill people. If you lie about that, then you're liable, right? And you've got to pay for the damages. And that's what these cases are about. They're very simple and straightforward. There's nothing novel about the law. And same with the racketeering case, nothing novel about what Missy's doing, really. In the United States courts, in this particular aspect of holding companies accountable for their actions, for the damages that they cause, the U.S. courts lead the world. And so this is, I think, of particular concern to the companies because they know that state courts, in particular in the United States, have a long history of holding companies that lie accountable for that lying.
Eventually, I mean, obviously, tobacco and opioids went on for decades doing that stuff. So, yes, eventually, this could actually be a turning point that you're pursuing here. Missy, I want to ask you something, because at the beginning, I did use the word revelation, specifically. You used the word apocalyptic, and I know that you happen to be a very religious person, and you've even said, I believe, that the Holy Spirit is your co-counsel. Talk to me a little bit about that, because, the Christian movement in the United States, for a long time, didn't want to speak out about climate mitigation other than talking about creation care. And the general public, for a long time, has not wanted to face up to this major scientific problem, trying to equate, the deniers with the science. Talk to me about the Holy Spirit being your co-counsel.
Well, faith is at the core of everything that I do, and justice is at the core of everything that I do. And I believe Jesus is justice. He is justice. He came for justice. And we are his hands and feet on this earth. And I don't know how you could see 4,645 people die and not be compelled to do something about it. James 4:17 says that if you know the good that you should do and you don't do it, it is a sin. And so for me, that is the driving force in everything that I do.
And it's not the first time that you have taken on this kind of thing. You sued a gas giant a while back. Tell me how that came onto your plate and how you successfully, sued them.
So I was a city attorney since 1995 when I graduated law school, and I represented little tiny towns all over north central Illinois. And I would fine the average person for, ordinance violations such as dog poop in their yard, tall weeds, broken windows, having 3 dogs in town instead of 2, all the things that I took people to court for. And I felt somewhat like a bully. And I was not born and raised Catholic. I was not raised to be a bully. I was raised to help people every day. And one of the towns I represented was the 14th worst environmental disaster in the country. Exxon, CBS, and Viacom made film for the film industry, among other things. And when everything went digital in the 80s, they left. And in the meanwhile, we have blue mud puddles. Blue is my jacket from the nickel, cadmium, chromium, lead. And the mayor just said, Missy, what can we do? Because everybody was pointing fingers at each other. Nobody was cleaning this mess up. And I said, we're just going to sue them. And the Holy Spirit, when I consulted with him, told me to fine them. So we fined them for littering.
I mean, it's extraordinary. And from that to this, so you know, we're seeing a through line here in your legal procedure. And you're right. I mean, you basically are holding them accountable. And let's see what the law decides. Richard, sometimes we like to turn inwards and hold our own selves up for examination. And we know, sadly, to the detriment of climate, that historically the media, especially in the United States, has failed to link extreme weather to the science and to climate change, and continues to do that by and large. It's much better. Many of the big organizations have done mea culpas and are actually, you know, following the science. But I just want to ask you, as an activist and the president of your organization, how does the storytelling, the public telling of this scientific problem affect what you can achieve?
Well, I think public sentiment is very important in this. And you know what we're trying to do with these cases, and the cases provide a factual basis for this story, is to change, in people's minds, change the story from climate change is a tragedy that we all are responsible for, and if we just had driven less or, you know, turned down the thermostat, it would have been fine, which is really not true, to the fact that it's a crime story. It's a true crime story. I mean, these companies have committed probably the most serious crime against humanity ever contemplated, which is to put the entire planet at risk, you know, with hundreds of thousands and millions of people's lives in danger every day. Today, even today, is a perfect example of it. So yeah, I mean, I think that's the guts of these cases. And that's the narrative that we need to push. You know, that's the narrative. People have been convinced by the industry that it's their problem. One of the things the industry did very well was to convince people that they are responsible for climate change, that it's their carbon footprint that's the problem, that, you know, if they drove less, it would solve the issue. That they shifted the guilt to people when in fact the guilt belongs with them. And I think these cases go a long way to helping people understand that climate change, you know, is not a tragedy. It's a crime that's been forced upon them by the oil companies who knew that their products were going to do this and went ahead and lied about it anyway and put us all in the situation we're in today.
So, Missy, then are you surprised that obviously the companies in question basically have frequently commented about these cases, claiming that the courtroom is not the place to resolve it, the place to address it is the government? Many U.S. judges have come to this conclusion themselves during a lot of these cases. And I think your case is going to be, by next year, early next year, we should know the result of your case. What do you say to what the fossil fuel companies say, that don't even bring it to court, it's not the place?
That's American jurisprudence. That's what we're built on. We're built on, if you have a case, you bring it before the court, but bring it before the jury decides that question. So we have an open court in the United States, and a jury will decide this issue, whether it's in Puerto Rico or one of the other cases that have been filed. They can't stop us.
Well, Missy Sims and Richard Wiles, thank you both very, very much indeed for joining.